The day the voices died. The first time the galaxy noticed humanity, it was not through our voices. It was through our silence. The alien conquerors, the KRYLL Dominion, prided themselves on control. They ruled hundreds of worlds, their fleets blotting out suns, their machines enslaving entire species. Their power was built on fear and noise. Every battle was loud. The roar of engines, the scream of weapons, the crushing propaganda that filled the skies of conquered planets. When they came for Earth, they expected the same. And at first they got it. Explosions painted our blue sky black. Cities crumbled. Human resistance screamed in defiance, but their cries were drowned by the Dominion's overwhelming might. In weeks, the world seemed lost. But then something happened. The last human fleet went silent. No transmissions, no signals, no pleas for help. Earth's armies, scattered across ruined continents, stopped broadcasting orders. No battle cries, no cries of pain, no hope, just silence. The KRYLL laughed at first. The humans have given up, their warlords said. Their spirit is broken. They marched across our world, expecting submission. But what they didn't understand was that silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. The man who heard the silence, Commander Eric Valen, the KRYLL general who oversaw Earth's subjugation, began to notice something strange. Entire battalions of his soldiers vanished. Ships disappeared from radar. Patrols stopped reporting back. And yet, not a single sound echoed through the airwaves. No human taunts, no demands, no chaos. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Meanwhile, hidden deep beneath the ruins of New York, a different kind of command center pulsed with life. Admiral Reyes, her face scarred and voice low, stood before the last gathering of Earth's commanders. The old radios and comm towers sat silent. Instead, humans used nothing but written codes, passed by hand, etched into walls scratched into steel. No sound, no transmissions, nothing for the Dominion to intercept. Our strength isn't in their noise, Reyes whispered. It's in our silence. Every scream they expect, we will deny. Every cry they want to hear, we will bury. And when they least expect it, that silence will become their grave. The humans nodded, their eyes burning. And so, Earth's war changed. The silent resistance. In the cities, humans began to vanish from the streets. Not fleeing, but hiding, waiting. The Dominion soldiers walked openly, mocking the broken species. But one by one, their squads went missing. In a silent hospital ward, Dominion medics found their soldiers dead, their weapons gone, and human graffiti etched into the wall. We don't need to scream. You will. On the seas, submarines, once thought destroyed, rose from the deep like ghosts. They struck Dominion ships and vanished again, leaving no trace but wreckage. In orbit, a captured Dominion dreadnought suddenly exploded, not with missiles but from within. Human engineers had infiltrated, cut wires, sabotaged engines, and escaped without a sound. The KRYLL commanders began to panic. For the first time in centuries, they fought an enemy they couldn't hear. An enemy that refused to give them the satisfaction of noise. The alien fear. Warlord Valen ordered new scans. Find them. Force them to scream. Force them to beg. But no matter how deep they searched, silence answered back. And then, the first real shock came. One night, as Dominion warships patrolled the skies, every human city went dark. Not destroyed, just completely black, like the lights of Earth had been swallowed. Then, without a word, the silence shifted. The Dominion comm channels were filled with one sound. Not a scream, not a battle cry, a heartbeat. One single, steady human heartbeat, transmitted across every ship, every channel, every world under Dominion control. Thump, thump, thump. It was slow, calm, patient. The KRYLL froze. Soldiers whispered. Commanders raged. But no one could stop the sound. The humans had turned their silence into a message. We are alive. We are waiting. And we will strike. The first strike. The Dominion thought they understood fear. They had crushed countless civilizations, silenced rebellions with fire and blood. But this was different. When the silence finally broke, it wasn't with human screams. It was with their ships exploding, one after another, across the solar system. Out of the void, Earth's hidden fleet emerged. Not mighty armadas like the KRYLL, but patched-together war machines made from broken satellites, scavenged wreckage, even whole skyscrapers reforged into weapons. They moved silently, no comms, no transmissions. Only the sound of metal ripping alien steel apart. Admiral Reyes stood aboard the Resolute, humanity's last great carrier, her voice steady as she whispered into her crew's ears, not over radio, but face to face. "No noise," she said. "No signal. Only silence. Let them drown in it." And as the first Dominion fleet crumbled under surprise attack, the galaxy finally realized. The humans had turned silence into the loudest weapon the stars had ever heard. The war without voices. The Dominion had faced rebellions before, but rebellions were loud. Riots, explosions, desperate pleas for mercy. Humanity's war was not like that. It was quiet. The silence spread like a virus. The contagion of silence. On Velkera, a slave world deep within the Dominion's grip, alien miners worked endlessly in chains. Normally, rebellions there lasted minutes before the Dominion's overseers crushed them. But this time, the miners did not shout. They did not riot. One day, they simply stopped making noise. No sound of pickaxes, no grunts of labor, no whispered conversations, nothing. The overseers barked orders, but silence answered back. When they tried to punish one alien, the rest only stared, stone-faced, wordless. The silence spread to other camps, then to the cities. Within days, Velkera became the first Dominion world to fall. Not with a battle, but with silence so absolute that Dominion soldiers fled in fear. Because in silence, they saw humanity's influence. The Dominion cracks. Warlord Valen raged. He ordered his ships to bombard any planet infected by silence. "We'll burn their quiet from the stars," he screamed. But the bombardments only made it worse. Whole species realized that silence was stronger than screaming. Screams gave the Dominion something to feed on. Silence gave them nothing. Across the galaxy, broadcasts vanished. Slave worlds shut down their comm networks. Even neutral planets joined, speaking not in words, but in stillness. And at the center of it all was Earth, the Ghost Fleet. Humanity's fleet became known as the Ghost Fleet. It struck without warning, without signal. Dominion convoys vanished into the void, found later torn apart. But no logs, no distress calls, no black box recordings. Just silence. The KRYLL grew paranoid. Their ships began to fire at shadows. Entire fleets wasted ammunition shooting at nothing, terrified that silence meant an ambush. And often it did. On the edge of the Andromas Belt, a Dominion dreadnought convoy was surrounded, not by massive warships, but by silence. The stars went dark, jammers cut communications, and for 2 hours, the ships heard nothing but the pounding of their own hearts. When the silence lifted, their fleet was gone. Humanity had struck, and no one heard a thing. The message of quiet. The galaxy began to whisper. Ironically, whispering was all they had left. The humans had created something stronger than armies. They had created an idea. The silence was no longer just a tactic. It was a weaponized philosophy. Admiral Reyes stood before her soldiers one night. No microphones, no speeches. She simply raised her hand, palm open. The soldiers did not cheer. They did not chant. They simply placed their fists against their hearts. That was enough. The Dominion's mistake. In desperation, the Dominion tried one final trick. They launched the Voice of Valen, a galaxy-wide broadcast meant to drown out humanity's silence. The KRYLL warlord's booming voice filled the skies of countless worlds. "We are the only power. We are the voice of order. You cannot hide in silence. You cannot." But mid-sentence it stopped. Every transmission cut off. Every Dominion broadcast went dark, because humanity had hacked the voice. And in its place across every star, every planet, every ship came nothing. Not a word, not a scream, just silence. The loudest silence in history. And in that silence, millions of slaves, rebels, and soldiers finally understood. The Dominion wasn't unstoppable. The humans weren't broken, and the galaxy was no longer afraid. The turning point. The KRYL Dominion had ruled for centuries with fire and fear, but it began to collapse, not with a bang, not with a war cry, but with silence. And the galaxy learned a truth it would never forget. When humans refuse to scream, when they deny their enemies even the sound of fear, they become the loudest force in existence. The silence that broke armies. The KRYL Dominion had ruled for 10,000 years. Their fleets were endless, their warlords brutal, their grip absolute. But humanity had given the galaxy something no one expected, the power to resist without a sound. And now, the Dominion struck back. The sound war begins. If silence was humanity's weapon, then noise would be the Dominion's counter. Entire fleets were equipped with resonance cannons, weapons that didn't just destroy, but shattered silence itself. They filled the void with sonic waves that could rip apart hulls and drive soldiers insane with vibrations. On the battlefield of Nerith Prime, the Dominion unleashed their first soundstorm. Cities crumbled under the pressure. Even the bravest soldiers felt their bones quake, their eardrums rupture. The Dominion warlords laughed. "Your silence is nothing," they roared. "We will drown it in sound." But humanity had already anticipated this. The birth of the Silent Choir. Admiral Reyes unveiled a secret project. Not a new fleet, not a superweapon, a choir. 100 humans, trained not in song, but in silence. Their bodies were laced with resonance-dampening implants. Their minds drilled to perfection in controlling heartbeats, breaths, even thought patterns. They were called the Silent Choir. When the Dominion unleashed their sonic storms on the battlefield of Alara, the choir stepped forward. Shoulder to shoulder, they stood against waves of crushing sound. And when the storm reached them, it stopped. The choir's silence absorbed it. The noise vanished into a vacuum of nothingness. Dominion soldiers stared in horror as their greatest weapon was erased by absolute quiet. That day, Alara fell, not to bombs or lasers, but to silence so perfect it killed sound itself. The fear of nothing. Across the galaxy, KRYL soldiers began to crack. They were used to enemies screaming when burned alive. They were used to fleets begging for mercy as they were vaporized. But humanity never screamed. A KRYL commander once recorded a battle log. "They stare at us with their cold, quiet eyes. They do not beg. They do not shout. They let us speak, and our words die in the air. We are fighting shadows, and I fear the shadows are winning." Silence had become more terrifying than war cries. The Ghost Armada. Humanity's fleets perfected their silent tactics. Engines muted, weapons fired without recoil, hulls cloaked not in invisibility, but in absence of signal. To Dominion sensors, it was as if entire armadas did not exist. And then, suddenly, ships would appear point blank, already firing, already striking, before vanishing back into silence. The Dominion lost 6 fleets in a single month this way. The galaxy began calling them the Ghost Armada, ships that were not seen, not heard, only felt when it was already too late. The Dominion's fracture. Even the Dominion's own slaves began using silence against them. In factories, in mines, in breeding pits, the silence spread. Overseers would walk into entire cities where not a single voice could be heard. No crying children, no shouting traders, no sounds of life. Just quiet rebellion. And that terrified the Dominion more than any army. The moment of realization. For centuries, the KRYL had believed that fear was the greatest weapon. But silence was worse. Because silence wasn't fear. Silence was defiance. And as the Dominion's warlords screamed into the void, demanding obedience, the void answered with nothing. The quiet that crowned a new empire. The Dominion's last roar. The KRYL Dominion was collapsing. Entire sectors slipped into silence, refusing orders. Fleets vanished into nothing. Slave worlds stopped working, not with riots or fire, but with stillness. The High Warlord of the KRYL gathered his dread armada, a fleet of 1 million warships. He vowed to erase Earth, to burn its silence from existence. If silence is their weapon, he bellowed, then we will crush the planet until it has screms. And so the largest armada in galactic history surged toward Sol. The silent line. Humanity had almost nothing left. Only 50 ghost ships remained to defend Earth. Against 1 million. But Reyes, scarred and unbroken, stood on the command bridge and whispered, "We don't need to outgun them. We just need to outlast them." The silent choir was awakened again, not 100 voices now, but 1,000. They linked their minds into one vast network, syncing breath and heartbeat, turning silence into a field that blanketed the entire solar system. The Dominion's sonic storms collapsed against it like waves against an endless wall. The battle of empty space. It wasn't war, it was absence. The Dominion fired barges of sound cannons. They vanished before they struck. Their fleets screamed with engines, but the void swallowed their signals. Their war cries echoed through the calms, but no human voice answered. The KRYLL Armada fought against nothing, and nothing consumed them. Then the ghost ships appeared, silent, invisible, cutting through the Dominion's lines like shadows. One by one, the Dread Armada's warships burned without ever hearing their killers. The collapse of the throne. When the KRYLL High Warlord finally arrived at Earth's orbit, he broadcast his voice across the system. "Humans, you cannot rule in silence. Power is noise. Power is control. Power is mine." But the humans did not answer. The choir simply opened their silence wider. The Warlord transmission was swallowed mid-sentence. The galaxy listened as the most powerful voice in history was erased. Not by weapons, not by kings, but by quiet. His fleet panicked, broke apart, and scattered. The Dominion's 10,000-year throne cracked in a single moment of absolute stillness. The crowning of silence. In the aftermath, humanity did not shout victory songs. They did not cheer. Across Earth and her colonies, they stood together in silence, a unity stronger than any empire's roar. The galaxy watched as the loudest empire ever known was defeated not by louder voices, but by none at all. And in that silence, a new kind of throne was built, one not of control, but of freedom. The legacy of silence. The silence that began as a weapon had transformed into something far greater, an inheritance. Humanity's war was over, but its echo was only just beginning to spread. Across the black oceans of the stars, civilizations whispered to the people who had forged thunder from nothing, who had struck the Seraph Dominion not with fleets or gods, but with something even more terrifying, stillness. The galaxy had seen fleets of fire before, had endured the wrath of supernovae, the terror of black hole weapons, the thunder of conquerors and kings, but had never seen silence wielded like a blade, never felt its crushing weight until the day humanity bled it into the cosmos. And now, every civilization, from the smallest frontier colony to the grandest empire, feared it. The broken throne, the Seraph Dominion lay in ruins. Its fleets had been scattered, its great throne world cracked by its own hubris. The silence humanity unleashed did not just disable their ships, it erased their arrogance. The Seraphs, who had believed themselves divine, who had commanded through terror, were reduced to whispers in exile. Some said they still lingered, surviving in the husks of forgotten stations, plotting revenge. But they were no longer gods. They were ghosts. And every time their voices rose, silence answered. The new council. In the aftermath, the galaxy did not return to the old ways of empire and dominance. Something new was born in the vacuum humanity left behind. A council comprised not of kings, not of warlords, but of listeners. Human representatives sat at the heart of this council. They were not conquerors. They did not demand tribute. Instead, they carried the memory of what silence had done. And every time another race tried to argue for old power, for conquest, for tyranny, the humans spoke with stillness. It was unnerving. It was effective, the whisper wars. But not all were ready to accept humanity's new role. Out on the galactic rim, Scattered factions began to rise. Pirates, remnants of old empires, serpent-like cults who believed silence was a curse. They tried to weaponize noise itself, building sonic cannons and resonance bombs, believing they could shatter the human legacy. They failed, because silence was not just a tool. It was a philosophy, a way of war, a way of survival. Where others made noise, humanity withdrew, invisible until the moment of strike. Where others relied on chatter, on bravado, humans needed none. They moved like shadows through fleets, their ships soundless predators, their armies ghosts in the void. And when they finally struck, it was as if the universe itself had gone mute. Entire fleets fell without warning, their screams swallowed. The galaxy called it the Whisper Wars. And in every battle, silence won. The memorial, on Earth, or what remained of it, they built a monument not of stone or steel, but of quiet. A city where no machines hummed, no engines roared, no voices broke the air. Pilgrims from across the galaxy traveled there to experience it, to feel the crushing beauty of true stillness. It was said that in that silence, you could hear the heartbeat of the cosmos itself. Children of alien races sat alongside human children in that city, their wide eyes learning not of bloodshed, but of the power of restraint. They did not learn hymns of war. They learned the discipline of silence. And slowly, the galaxy began to change. The last seraph. But there was one more test. From the shadows of a fractured moon, a seraph warlord rose, one who had survived the collapse of their empire, one who carried the bitter hatred of a fallen god. He gathered the remnants of his kind, reforging them into a blade meant to pierce humanity's heart. And for a time it worked. Worlds trembled again. Fleets vanished. The galaxy feared the return of the gods. But humanity did not fight with noise, with bluster, with war drums. They fought with silence. When the seraph fleets surged into human space, expecting fire, they found nothing. Empty stations, abandoned colonies, ships without pilots. And then, darkness. The seraph warlord realized too late that he was surrounded by silence, so vast it felt alive. His ships stopped moving. His weapons stopped firing. His voice stopped carrying through the void. In the end, there was no battle, only stillness. The last seraph screamed into the quiet, and the universe did not answer. The inheritance. Generations later, humanity no longer needed to fight. Their children did not carry weapons. They carried silence. Explorers moved across the stars not as conquerors, but as listeners. Traders carried silence into alien markets, where it was treated as a rare and sacred gift. Philosophers wrote of the human war not as a victory, but as a warning that the loudest powers can fall to the quietest strengths. And in time, the galaxy began to emulate them. Fleets spoke less. Leaders paused before commanding. Even entire species who had lived their lives in noise began to understand the depth of stillness. It was not submission. It was survival, the final gift. At the edge of known space, on a world wrapped in frozen oceans and endless stars, humanity left a beacon. It did not broadcast signals. It did not hum or shine. It simply sat in silence. And yet, across light years, across the endless stretch of time, every species felt its presence. Not through sound, not through light, through the weight of stillness that carried the memory of war, the memory of survival, the memory of a species that had turned silence into a weapon and then into a gift. And so the galaxy changed. No longer did it roar with endless wars. No longer did it scream with tyranny. It pulsed with quiet strength, with the knowledge that silence itself could be the loudest cry for freedom. The end. In the end, humanity had not needed to become the loudest. They had not needed to drown the universe in fire. Instead, they gave the stars a new truth. That silence, when wielded with resolve, could echo louder than any weapon. And in that silence, the galaxy finally heard freedom.